This morning I want to talk to you about a changing tree. And you've all heard the text, and I'm going to try to go through this again. Probably be the shortest message I've ever preached. And when I take a text from 1 King, most of y'all know that I'm talking about Elisha. My back screen's not working. So, okay. I don't know if you'll help that for me. But we're going to talk about Elisha this morning. Elijah had 8 miracles in his career, and we're not going to be talking about a lot about the miracles that he had. We'll get into a message with those later on. But this morning I want to talk to you just about a couple things, and so I'm going to mention one of his miracles or two to help set the stage to get into this message this morning. God chose Elijah and to do some things, and Elijah was a very dedicated man of God. If Elijah got the message from God to do something, that's exactly what he done. He did not worry about who he offended. He didn't worry about whose toes he stepped on. He didn't worry about what the kings had to say. He would march in and give the message to the kings or whoever it was. If God told him to do it, he did what he was told to do, and he would do it as soon as he possibly could when he got the message. He was the kind of soldier that was dedicated, loyal, and wanted to follow the orders of his commander-in-chief. He wanted to follow through everything exactly the way it was. If you will recall with your own self, a lot of times we will get something in our mind on day 1. On day 2, the devil starts deteriorating some of the things that we had in our mind yesterday. On day 3, we can barely remember all the things we were supposed to say. On day 4, we even forget who we're supposed to say it to. When God tells us to do something, honey, the time to do it is when he tells us, and we need to get on fire for God and follow what he tells us to do when he tells us to do it. Amen. So Elijah goes in and tells one of the wicked kings that there's not going to be any rain. Here, you guys want to serve Baal? You want to serve a false god? So what we're going to do, my God says there's not going to be any rain here for the next 3 years. I need a bottle of water, please, somebody. Keith, somebody. So the next 3 years, there's not going to be any rain. So this is the way it works. Now, I thank God for the little rain that we had here Wednesday night. It wasn't much, but it's better than nothing. Our grass was already brown and crunchy, but I can't imagine what it would be in for 3 years. Now, you haven't got rain for 3 years. That means you're going to have a great famine in the land. Bobby, you know that without water, you can't raise crops. It takes water to make this happen. So now then, they don't have rain, they don't have crops, they've got a famine, they've got a situation coming up on their hands. Everything is going bad. So here comes a showdown at OK Corral, you might say. Elijah goes in and they meet with this wicked king, and they decide, well, why don't we decide who can call fire down from heaven, and whoever's God can bring this fire down from heaven, that's going to be the God of the land. All right, let's get this together. So we had one man for God and 450 for Baal. So they go out to the OK Corral, or better known as Mount Carmel. So they kill the ox, and they build the altar the way they're supposed to, and they put the ox upon the altar. Elijah says, wait a minute. Before I start, well, I'm getting a little sideways here. They let Baal's people go first. So they marched around, they danced around, they pranced around, they screamed, they hollered, they cut themselves. They did everything that they could do, Brother Ed, to get fire to come down. But let me tell you, when you're praying to a dead God, you're going to get dead results. Even back then, you've got to understand that we can get something out of the Old Testament, and what this story is telling us, that you cannot serve a living God and a dead God. You can't serve two masters. You've got to choose which one you're going with, the world, or you're going with God. Which one are you going to serve? So when Elijah got tired of watching the circus of everybody marching around and 450 people jumping up and down and screaming and hollering and bleating, he said, let me show you how it's done, guys. But before I do, go get me 4 barrels of water. Now, I don't know where they went to get 4 barrels of water when it hadn't rained for 3 years. But they went and got 4 barrels of water, and they poured water on this sacrifice. Now, have you ever heard anybody say, if that don't light your fire, your wood's wet? Well, this 4 barrels of water not only soaked the sacrifice, but it also soaked the wood. He said, well, that looks pretty good, but my God's better than 4 barrels of water. Go get 4 more. So they went and got 4 more barrels of water. So now they got 8 barrels of water poured on there. He turned around, he said, wait a minute, that's still not enough. Go get 4 more barrels. 12 barrels of water they poured on the sacrifice. There was water running everywhere. The wood was soaked. They built rocks around the altar and the little barricade to hold the water. It was water running everywhere. You would have thought if they was wanting fire to come down from heaven, they would wadded up newspaper, kindling, you know. Well, maybe a lightning strike will come down through here or something. But when you're dealing with the God that created the universe, you don't have to worry about anything to help him out. He don't need your help to do miracles. He needs your trust. He needs your dedication. He needs you to do what he tells you to do, and whatever he says is the right way. But the problem with us today is we think we are smarter in God. I had a man sit in that office right in there just a couple years ago that told me that he wouldn't pay tithes to the church because he was better at managing money than God was. Honey, let me tell you, when you think you're better at anything than God is, the first thing you need to do is find an altar. Brother Paul, there is nothing in this world that I'm better at than God. He created me. He gave me the breath to live. He made the air that I breathe. I'm going to be here till he says I'm ready to go. When he says I'm ready to go, honey, there's nothing here that's going to keep me. He is in charge. And if we would get our mind straightened out that we are going to listen to what he says and do what he says, no matter what the world says, we will be better off. Amen. So he didn't worry about putting kindling. He didn't worry about putting lighter fluid. He didn't worry about running down here to Citgo and getting a gallon of gasoline and pouring it around. All he wanted to do was what God said to do, and that was just do whatever I say to do, and that's pour water. Now we got water everywhere. So after all this is done in the waters there, Elijah prayed 62 words. And the fire come from heaven. Not only the fire come from heaven and took care of the sacrifice.
Just burned it all up.
You two are sisters, aren't you? It took the sacrifice, burnt the woods. I think the word in King James, it licked up the water, the rocks around the altar. Honey, it's all gone. Everything is completely taken care of. And then to add insult to injury, Elijah prays to God for the rain to start. When he sees a little cloud coming, then he tells King Ahab, the wicked king, you might want to head on back into town. You know, the rain's coming, and you might want to head on back into town. So as he gets in his horse and chariot and heads back into town, Elijah on foot, I could see Bobby Mixon doing this, decides he's going to take off and outrun the horse and chariot on foot. How would you like to be a king with royal horses and royal chariot, and here comes the guy that's opposing you, outrunning your chariot on foot? So King Ahab gets back into the house, and his wicked wife Jezebel says, oh, honey, you're all wet. It must be raining. Tell me what happened today. You got everything worked out. I'm so glad it come out to our favor. It's wonderful that we prevailed over that crazy Elijah guy that says there's a God in heaven. Just tell me all about it, darling. And the more that King Ahab told her about what happened, the madder she got, the more outraged that she became. And so finally she says, I'm going to send a message to him. By this time tomorrow, I'm going to have his head on a platter. Now please keep in mind, this is miracle number 5 of Elijah. Here is a man of God that can speak to the sky and it not rain for 3 years. Here's a man of God that can actually insult the worship of idols, praying down fire, add 12 barrels of water to soak the wood. Here's a man that can speak 62 words and God he answers his prayer. And here again, God is not just here to answer your prayer, but if you will think back to every time that God has showed up for you, he has been more than enough for everything that we have needed for our entire life. When we are in sickness, when we are in trouble, he shows up and he shows us more than what he's supposed to do. He don't just take care of this little thing, Wayne. He goes above and beyond again and again. He exceeds far above. He just did not just take the sacrifice, but he went everything around it. Amen. Yes. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from the Old Testament. And then Elijah says, God, we need a little rain down here. How about turn them sprinklers on? Yeah. And guess what? The sprinklers come on. And then he outrun the king. But here's my question to you this morning. The man that could do all of this and outrun the king's horses and the chariot, where did he run to? Where did he run to? See, Elijah done everything that he could do. He did miracles. He did what God told him to do. In his day and time, I'm sure he was the utmost standing, closest man to God that lived in that era of time. Everything that happened, he talked to God. But here's the problem. And we say that crazy Elijah, why did he run and hide under that juniper tree? That crazy man, why did he say, God, I'm just ready to die. Just go and take my life. Let me tell you that. I'm going to get on your toes here, but I'm telling you the truth. Why in the world did he do? He did exactly the same thing that you do. Every time we get in trouble with God, we don't run to God, we run from God. Every time we get in trouble, what do? We say, well, where was God when I needed this? What happened to God? Why did this happen to me? I'm just going to go do this. I'm going to take care of this myself. What we need to understand is that you are put in situations to prove God can take care of you. If you never went through the battle, how do you know God could give you the victory? Amen. If you never went through sickness, how would you know God can heal? If you never had trials, how do you know God can prevail? I said yesterday at the funeral, I can't find anywhere in the Bible where God ever gave you a victory that you didn't have to fight the battle to get it. Honey, let me tell you something. Just because you serve God don't mean that you won't have problems. Just because you serve God don't mean you won't go through trials. Just because you serve God don't mean you won't have sickness, you won't have problems. But here's the thing, that the devil will tempt you when you're laying on your sickness bed. The devil will put things in your mind. The devil will try his best to get you so discouraged that you will not turn around and recognize the fact that I need to call God. You will recognize the fact that all I want to do is quit. All I want to do is get out of here. I want to take the easy way out. I don't want to fight any more battles. I don't want to go through any more storms. All I want to do is just go on home. Honey, but that's not God's plan. His plan is that we are witnesses, that we are soldiers, that we fight for him, and that we continue to stand for him. Amen. Amen. If Elijah never come out from under the changing tree, it would have changed the world. When he was under the juniper tree, if God had took him home, they wouldn't have been on Elisha. All the miracles that Elisha performed would not have happened. Think about it. Yes, sir. See, that juniper tree became a changing tree. And the reason it became a changing tree is Elijah had to come back to his mind and say the same words that Jesus said on the cross. Not my will, amen, but your will. Yes. And Wayne, sometimes as this old road gets rough, sometimes as our life gets weak, sometimes as our body aches, sometimes as everything that can go wrong goes wrong, and then we get an IRS letter. Everything happens, you know. They say that when it rains, it pours. Amen? Yep. But that don't mean it's time for us to quit. That means it's time for us to stand for God more than we've ever stood for before. Let me give you an example. How many people is watching your life you don't know? You don't have any idea. But Brother Ed, since you're sitting on the front row, I'm just going to pick on you. By the way, I like your hairdo this morning. For all the people that's watching your life, if they heard you say, it's not worth it. Serving God is not worth all the problems that I have to go through. I've served God for years, and look where I'm at now. I am just not going to do this anymore. I am just not going to serve God. How many people would that affect? Many. And here's the problem. That's what the devil wants you to say. The devil wants you to stay under the juniper tree and say, God, just take me home. I'm tired of fighting. I don't want to be a soldier any longer. But honey, when God takes you home, how many people will go to hell because your testimony is not there to bring them the right way? The changing tree. See, this man was hiding there because of this one woman, because of this one statement, because of this one threat had stopped this man from trusting in his one God. See, there's some things that will cause a discouragement today, hardness of the way. I can't do what the flesh wants me to do. See, the Bible tells us that the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And the devil will use the flesh as weak so much that tries to get us to fall into temptation.
Yes, he does.
Try to do this. Just do that. Don't worry about this. Go on and do that. It causes discouragement, difficulty to the task. Well, that's going to be a hard job. Let me tell you, the harder the task, the sweeter the victory.
Amen. Oh, yes.
The more difficulty that you've got to go through, the more suffering that you go through, the sweeter the reward is going to be. Honey, the more times that you stand for the right thing with your children and your grandchildren, the better chance you're going to see your grandchildren swing through those gates in heaven. I can't serve God when I want to. No, you have to serve him all the time. There's no part-time God. You can't serve Baal on Tuesday and God on Wednesday. Here's one that bothers Christians: jealousy. Why does the world have nicer things than I do? Because this is all the heaven they're going to get.
Yes, sir.
Don't worry about the fancy things that they have, because this is all they're going to get. When they close their eyes, they're going to torment. Honey, when we close our eyes, we are going to be rewarded.
Amen.
Somebody needs to be shouting right now.
Yes. Amen.
Quit worrying about what the world's got. Our world is coming.
Amen. We are not citizens of this world.
And then number 4, why don't God answer my prayers? I want to be this or I want to be that. I've told you before, the guy come to me when I was pastoring in Ocala. He wanted me to pray that he could win the lottery so I can start paying tithes. How selfish is your prayer? Now, pay attention. Pay attention. Here's what Roger Bennett said. Now, Roger Bennett, some of you don't even know who Roger Bennett is. He was the piano player for the Cathedral Quartet, and that was my favorite group. No offense, Bobby, to the McCameys. But Roger and Peg are probably dancing on the same street right now. But Roger Bennett says, I quit praying for God to heal me. I started praying for God to use me until he takes me. I quit praying for God to heal me. I started praying for God to use me until the day he takes me. Honey, it don't matter if we go with one arm or one leg or one eye. What matters is where we go when we shut our eyes. Honey, we need to get out from under the changing tree and get back to work. We need to realize that as long as we're hiding under the tree, we're not serving God. I want you to understand that. It's kind of like we're on break. You can't serve God while you're hiding under the tree. You got to come back out to do the will of God. Sister Mary, I want to ask you this morning, don't you think it's time that you get out from under the tree? Don't you think it's time that we really get serious with God and say, God, I'm not asking you for anything from me. I'm just asking you to use me until you come. God, if you can use me better this way, make me that way. If you can use me better some other way, make me some other way. But however you can use me the most, God, that's what I want. I just want to be the instrument that you can use me to reach more people. There's a story about a guy that thought he was helping. Had such a soft heart, and he would tell people, I understand, I understand, I understand. And he met this guy, and this guy said, I'm having such a rough time. He said, I understand. I'm so sorry for you. He said, my wife has left me. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. I understand that you're going through it. I know it's got to be difficult. She took my kids and left. I'm so sorry. I understand. I've lost my job. I don't have any money. I understand. I'm so sorry. I said, I think I'm just going to end it all. He said, well, I understand how you feel. It's got to be rough. I understand. And he walked off and left him. Did he help him? No. See, sometimes we can be so comforting that we become a hindrance more than we can be a help. You cannot fight the devil without being combative. And for these TV preachers, and I know we're never going to get there, but for all these TV preachers says you got to be non-combative to win souls, honey. Let me tell you, you can't show me that in my Bible. Because for every soul that the devil owns, he's going to fight to keep. And if we're going to fight to win them, we've got to fight to get them. And honey, let me tell you, just because I understand is not really the words that somebody needs to hear. We got to stand for the right, we got to stand for the good, and we got to stand for God. And it's going to make some people mad. It's going to hurt some feelings. But honey, we'll be held accountable for what we say and how we direct people. Can I ask you this morning one more time? Isn't it about time to get out from under the tree? Come off of that coffee break and let's get back to work for God. You want to pray at your seats, or if you want to pray at the altar, let's take a couple minutes and have prayer.